wait out in the hall until it was somebody else.
We're live. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the February 15th Program Advisory Committee meeting. I'd like to note that we are starting the meeting at 4:45. Just a reminder, the meeting is being streamed live on MVTC's YouTube page, and I'd like to note that PAC Chair Palchik is also joining us virtually due to a family medical reason. She's asked me to chair the meeting as she can't be here in person. Welcome, Chair Palchik, and feel free to jump in anytime after we've moved on the electronic resolution. Staff have now confirmed a quorum. We actually have all members of the committee here and Mr. Karantonis from Arlington. We do need to take action to approve Chair Palchik's remote participation. Can I have a motion to approve Chair Palchik's request to participate?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstained? No. All right. Motion's approved. Chair Palchik, welcome.
Thank
you
you
hear
so much.
Okay, great. And everybody can hear her? Yeah. Okay, great. Keep moving?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So as part of today's meeting materials, we are provided a summary of the September 21st, 2023 PAC meeting. Does anyone have any comments to share with staff? I'm hearing none. So the committee will accept the summary of that meeting. Moving right along, we are going to have a facilitated discussion about NVTC's research strategic plan. And I see Ms. Harmony joining us. Over the years, NVTC has done an amazing job providing valuable, timely research and analysis on a variety of topics, such as the recently updated value of transit study. Last year, the Commission decided to step back and take a more strategic approach to the research NVTC should conduct while still maintaining the ability to react quickly to issues that opportunities that pop up. Xavier, would you please provide us with a little more context on the strategic plan and introduce our facilitator?
Sure, and I'll be brief to try and get things started. So thank you all. Nice to see you all this evening. So right now we are working, as mentioned, on a strategic transit policy research program. The purpose of this project is to support staff in developing a strategy for regional transit policy research over the next 4 to 6 years. The consulting team that is helping MVTC do this includes InfraStrategies and the ENO Center for Transportation, and members from both organizations at the end of the table, and they'll be facilitating the discussion in a few minutes. They will be conducting the strategic planning exercise this evening. Hope that we get input into the strategic vision for MVTC's research priorities in the coming years. These inputs will be used to help develop a refined vision and research priorities to help develop our policy research agenda moving forward. So very brief, but we'll get more detail from the slides. And I will introduce Joshua Schenk, who will be leading the discussion. And with him is Sophie and Andy from InfraStrategies and ENO, and they will take it on here.
Great. Thanks, Xavier. And thank you for having me here. I'm Joshua Schenk with InfraStrategies. If you're confused, I used to be with ENO, so that's very complicated. We are partnering with ENO. But I'm now with InfraStrategies, and what we're going to do today is we're going to try to get some input from this group about the NVTC research program, so that we have we make sure to take into account what your considerations are, what your thoughts are as far as research. It won't be painful; it'll be easy. I promise you, we're going to make it as easy as possible. We go to the next slide just to do quick stuff. I think Xavier essentially went through this already, but the idea is that this is the research program. It's one of the unique features of this organization that you have this dedication to research, and it's a contribution that you can really make in this region. We've done a lot of work looking at other organizations, similar organizations already, and looking at their research programs. No one quite like you, so and that's great because it does present opportunities. Next slide. So the idea here is, we don't want to just come up with like, okay, this would be an interesting thing to look at and then go look at that, right? We want to have some strategy behind the research program so that there is a clear direction, that we know we're doing something meaningful and useful that supports the mission of the organization, right? And that's why we're doing this along with many other activities to figure out what this program should look like. And that includes looking at what the research pipeline should look like and how that research pipeline might be funded, because we don't want to just rely on the funding that we have available. We want to make sure that we're maximizing the sources of funding to maximize the benefit of the research program. That's similar to how ENO does things, similar to how other think tanks do things. they're not just thinking about what's the best stuff to look at, they're also thinking of what can we get funded. You have to balance both of those things. All right, next slide. So this is how we think of the policy, I'm going to move over here, policy research roadmap, right? So it's similar to a strategic vision for anything. Like if you're doing a strategic plan for an organization, a strategic vision of any kind, you want to essentially have the mission and vision for the organization right here. Yeah, it's kind of the guiding principle. Everything you're doing at NVTC, including the research program, has to go along with the mission and vision. But then there's a specific vision for the research program itself. And that's something that we're trying to develop through this process. And based on that vision, you have research priorities that fall out of that vision. And then you have a structure and pipeline that feeds into those research priorities. And then, of course, as I mentioned, who are you going to work with? Where's the money going to come from? Is a really important part of it. So what we're going to talk about today is it's kind of difficult to narrow down a vision with a big group of people, but it's a little bit better to talk about some of the research priorities that will help us figure out what that vision should look like. And then we'll shape the rest of it from there. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Next slide. So just so you understand where we are in this process and how it's going to go from here. So we're currently still in the stakeholder engagement component of this process. And so you are part of that stakeholder engagement process. We've done a lot of research and already talked to subject matter experts in the field. I mentioned we did a lot of research to figure out what are the other organizations that do this and what do they look like and how do they structure their research program. And we're, of course, not only the PAC, but the other commissioners, as well as staff and partners at NVTC are all going to be part of how we engage stakeholders and get their perspectives on what this research vision should look like. And then we'll move on to, okay, now we're going to figure out what's the vision look like based on what we've heard. We're going to figure out what are the partnership opportunities that come out of that vision. And then we're going to be able to finalize the policy research roadmap based on all of that information. And that will be a great way for, yeah, I was wondering if you could move that thing. I don't know if it's possible.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to distract.
That's okay. No, I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Blocking some of the words.
Sorry, give you space. I just don't know what else is going to be covered up as we keep going.
Nothing really. It's okay, probably.
And we have the
that's
paper.
great.
Oh,
We'll have to
look
get
at when
that.
we need Dahlia
It's
back.
important to see that it
Just-
results in actual.
I put it down to some
All right, thank you. All right, next slide. So before we get into the workshop and what we're going to do today over the next 20, 25 minutes, does anyone have any questions on or thoughts about what we just went over as far as the research program? Yeah.
Can I just ask, because I wasn't here, when was the last time this kind of, or this is like,
We've never actually done this type of activity. We've done some strategic work on the organization as a whole. Ironically, 10 years ago, before, right, the week before I started, this gentleman actually facilitated NVTC strategic planning effort that resulted in our mission and vision and things like that. Not always folds into our work plan, but thinking strategically, specifically about the research program, this is new.
Okay.
Yeah.
that's great.
So.
Thank you.
And I will say, so far, the organizations we've talked to, most of them don't think strategically about their research program either. So it's great to do it because it will give you such a leg up. A lot of places are just like, oh, where do we get funding? What am I thinking about today? It's great to have a little more vision associated with it. Okay, so let's go to the activity. And this is where we're going to get your input, and we're going to try to make it as easy as possible for you to do that. So the first part of this discussion is to think about the topics that you think would be most critical for transit in Northern Virginia over the next 4 to 6 years. So what does that mean? When you think about the challenges that Northern Virginia is facing with public transit, what are the things that come to mind that you think, well, if we had research on this particular topic, we would be better equipped to address some of those challenges, or our partners would be better equipped, or the region would be better equipped to address those challenges. And what we're going to do is we're going to have you tell us some of the topics. Sophie's going to write them on the board back there. And we're going to then try to dig a little deeper into each of those topics after we figure out what they are. But a topic for transit research that you think is really valuable for this region. Does anyone want to start us off?
Sure.
Yes, thank you.
I don't even know if it counts. How can we get more people on transit?
So ridership,
Yeah, like
Yeah.
we do all these wonderful things, but if nobody's riding it,
pretty basic, right? Yeah, like, how do we increase ridership?
room for improvement.
The two things that come to mind for me that are education about transit. What is the most effective way to make people more confident that they know how to use public transit? I think one thing I've seen with Dash going fare free is it also eliminated all the anxiety about having the right app, the amount of ticket, do I need to physically have something or not? And so that is unrelated to frequency and routes and such like that, but it eliminated a barrier to people using transit that has nothing to do with the actual emissions or locations, but was just like, oh, the bus is coming, I'll just get on, so I think education and confidence in accessing the systems. I think I'll throw into that like my own experience in like London last year. The transit app that I use here worked in London. I found myself standing outside the football stadium in Brentford and like was like, I wonder if there's a bus, you know what I mean? And I just opened the transit app and
Which app was it?
it's the transit app. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm not trying to be cute, but like, yeah, but like it just brought up the next buses and like took a bus back into the city. And so I think what I'm finding increasingly when we talk about trying to convince people, money isn't doing it, safety isn't doing it, emissions doesn't necessarily do it. I think part of it is like the average person knows how to walk out of their house into their driveway and get in their car and drive the same route they've taken 100 times before. How do we lower the educational and the like it's different feeling and barrier that exists?
Yes, I mean, that's what I think I'm hearing two different things from you, right? One is giving people the information they need to make them more comfortable riding. The other is making it easier, just reducing the barriers, the friction when riding in general, right? That you sometimes like you were saying with Dash, you don't need any information.
Yeah.
It's free, so that's great. But there are other ways to do that besides making it free. There's other ways to reduce that friction. So those are two great topics. Yes.
I actually can think of three things that I'd like to see. And Libby and Takis know that I'll be a broken record on this, but women have very different needs when it comes to transit. And if you read a book called Invisible Women, you will see that, we have built so many systems, including transit, for the default human, the guy who just goes to work and goes home. And then goes,
And carries a briefcase.
Carries a briefcase, and that's it. They don't
No
have
babies, no diaper bags, no
no babies, no
strollers.
diapers back. Don't have to stop
No
at the dry cleaner.
groceries.
Don't have to do the grocery shopping. Basically do the 99% of the work that is required to run a household. So I'd like to see us maybe do, if it fits in this. I'm new on this committee, but if it fits in with this discussion or this research, I would love to see how we can design our systems to work better for women. The second thing I was thinking about now, I come from Loudoun and we have 3 new stations, and with COVID and the new commuter patterns, what worries me the most is how do we have what are the attractions around the transit, and do people know how to get to those attractions? Those sorts of things. And I know that things are going to be built in a different way, probably outside of transit, and there may be new things that people want to take transit to. Hopefully in Loudoun County, there will be new things that people want to take transit to. And
So can I just clarify that? So you're saying that it would be interesting to look at how we get people to use transit to go to events?
to go to anything but work.
So non-work activities.
Yeah. How do we get people to use it to do anything but go to work, which dovetails a little bit onto the first topic I was talking about, right? Because women have to do a lot more things than go to work and back. Most women.
And education. So you're talking about educating people how to use transit about non-work activities, or well, I guess it's also within increasing the ridership, right? So
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, I wrote
the
that.
underlying concern.
No, I was hearing like that's an opportunity for transit to expand its market share, right, is the non-work trips.
And then lastly, I was just thinking about the younger generation, right? Like, the kids that are just starting their jobs or people that, are a lot younger than us and figuring out what their needs are with transit, because they might be very different than the needs of the people that are sitting in this room.
So not just gender specific, but also age or generational.
Yeah, generational. Mhm. Yeah, like literally like breaking down segregating the data, so to speak.
And I want to recognize the chair. If I can add one quick thing, Dahlia, before I turn to you. On that point, the average cost of owning a car went up, I think, 13% last year, and the average car payment is now $700. So, like, when you talk about the age difference, like, my first car was less than $10,000. It was Dodge Neon, but I'm just saying, like, I bought it making like $21,000 a year, and my car payment was like $180 or something. Like, that just doesn't exist anymore. And so, like, the way people are even entering the transportation space financially is just fundamentally different. It's just like housing, like the things we take for granted about, like, well, you get a good job, you buy a house because that makes sense. The same thing is true of a car, though. I mean, you get a good job, you cannot necessarily afford a $700 a month. I mean, that's what my parents' mortgage payment was. So, I mean, but right. So I completely wholeheartedly agree, like, with sort of the age point. And then the gender point, I as you were saying it, completely agree with that too. And I also think we need to expand that into, like, if we build a systems that work for seniors and the disabled, we will have a system that works for everybody, including women doing, grocery runs and daycare pickups and such. But if we expand our design model to be more inclusive, it would
Tends to help everybody.
it would tend to
Yeah,
help
yeah.
everybody.
Yeah.
I don't dismiss at all, like, the gender
Like
specific
ADA
lens.
crosswalks and sidewalks.
Yeah, exactly.
Then you can do a stroller, then you can do a bike, then you can do a scooter.
Exactly.
How do I now?
She's-
Oh, she's good. Okay, Chair Palchik.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, good. Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I love this discussion. I'm sorry I'm not with you in person. I'm probably tacking on a little bit of what I've been hearing. And from my perspective, I think expanding it even more so than even the last two commissioners got to, which is knowing, right, the needs and the reliability and the cost when we're trying to get more people to use the system, thinking about what is missing to help make our entire ecosystem for reliable and cost-effective transportation able to reduce the need to own a car, right? Whether or not you can. So whether that, I mean, Northern Virginia is the only place I've lived where I had to buy a car because there are not whether it's the bus, the rail, the car share, the bike share, the safe walk sidewalks, to know that for someone who non-gender specific doesn't have, a 9-to-5 job that they go and they come back, has a much more different schedule and needs and can't not have something reliable, right, to get around. And so what is missing in our Northern Virginia ecosystem to help less people feel that they absolutely, cannot live without having that car to be able to do the things they need to do.
So could we call that strategies for reducing car ownership?
Our dependence?
Yeah, I guess looking at, right, what is the entire transit system, right? What are the missing links to reduce the car reliance? So I think it's like all of the above, but
Yeah. Well, because car ownership in cities around the world is correlated certainly with transit, but it's not just transit, right? There's lots of other factors. And so that's why
I had car share, right? That made me feel, okay, if I ever absolutely have to have a car, right, in a city, that's there. But most of the time it's not necessary because there are all these other ways. Yeah.
right.
The last point she made was the one I was going to make. The one thing that I am noticing too, I'm thinking the people we need to hear from are the people we don't see. So I think that's the tricky part that you're going to have to, right? If they're not on transit, we want to talk to them. How do we find them?
So non-riders and
Yeah, people that are there, that's great. We want to talk to people who aren't there Why aren't they there? What do we need to do? What's the problem? We think we've got some good ideas.
So understanding what non-riders need, you're kind of getting, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Similar.
it's just hard to find the people you don't see.
Yeah.
So, all valid points. Julie, you remind me of this. I discovered that I made as a student when a mayor of a Paris suburb said, and now in all VRE equivalent stations, we'll have a daycare as part of the project as a standard. And since then,
And in Sweden, they all have grocery
so you
stores when
go,
you
you
get
know,
out.
it's park and ride, and you
Oh,
and
awesome.
applies to
Yes.
male transit riders too. So
Yes, yes. We
so
should
anyway,
take parents.
so transit demographics is for me a very important thing. This is the country that we have a complete segregation. And who rides with me? My bus in the morning is really not reflective of the average demographic of the place. This is a huge problem. So talking about the car dependency, yes, it's a function of income. And the most absurd thing is that where we have the highest income and the highest, tax capacity, we have, in comparison, the lowest quality of transit delivery instead of the opposite, right? We try always to satisfy and that has a lot to do with impact of transit. I think one of the amazing things that the team of NVTC has done this year is to argue for what's the economic impact of transit and where does it materialize in a world that things are changing. The work is changing. Our idea of how urban land use can work is changing. So we are coming out of a few decades, dominated by the transit-oriented development realm, and I think we need to redefine, research what the transit-oriented development proposition is today. That's one thing. Yeah. That includes how we cover the territory. For example, this is a metropolitan region that has already 6 million people. Northern Virginia is really growing very fast. Yet we have amazing pieces that are not covered by transit or not covered good enough. We are discussing here, 7 BRT lines. We have vast. I mean, the Eisenhower corridor was not that Beauregard corridor was not covered by transit. Alexandria responded with a complete rethinking of their master transportation plan to that, successfully in my opinion. But they responded to, not efficient geography of transit. We are the only metropolitan region of that size that I know in the Western world that is very reluctant to discuss the expansion of the systems. It takes us like decades to get the Silver Line. The cost of that is absolutely absurd. In Arlington, Virginia, I was seeing cost per mile, per passenger mile that are absolutely not comparable. London is less costly than we are. London, UK. So that's for me, cost
of expansion or cost of capital.
Infrastructure cost of operation, etc., which is unusually high.
Cost for everything.
And then the substitution of models. We have double bus systems here. Yellow buses for schools, and so
Actually,
triple
Metro yellow buses and then our locals.
So that there's a lot of overlapping and overcapacity. And
It
that's
still
a
isn't
fundable-
getting people where they
And
need
I
to
hope
go.
this is fundable, right?
Sorry. Okay.
I had another
that's
comment that kind of ties in what you guys were saying, something that I have found a little bit frustrating. And I don't know if we can do this, but is there a way to, I don't know, with mapping or something like that, to figure out what not just the need, but what is the potential capacity out there for riders or users? So I feel like in my jurisdiction, I don't know about you guys, but in my jurisdiction, we have this mentality of, well, we're not going to put a route there because there's no demand. Like, well, how do you know if there's no demand?
That's what I'm saying, you don't
It's
talk to
like,
people who aren't there.
Build a bike lane.
oh, yes, trust me.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
the same, it's the
But
same.
for me,
right.
it's like, well, actually, if you build it, they will come. And my bike lanes prove that, right? It's
Yep.
like, people say, but yeah, then all of a sudden you see all these people walking and biking
Right.
and all that. So I mean, you're the experts, but it's like, how would you figure out, what
Well,
the
there is-
capacity is?
Because sometimes you build it and they don't come. That's an issue we've got with, right?
With what?
Well, like getting people back on Metro, getting people back on.
But that's a whole different story.
Well, yeah, but I'm just.
Yeah.
The data we have on travel patterns is better than anything we've ever had in history because people's cell phones are with them at all times and to use
Yes.
this
Oh,
really
right.
good ideas where people are
Yeah, you
going.
can tell.
So it's a lot easier to say, okay, we see a lot of people going from here to there, maybe we should run a bus there rather than just guessing. So, yeah.
Dave's been waiting.
Snyder.
Really crazy.
Like, oh, I didn't know you were waiting,
Yeah.
sorry.
I'm glad I waited because I agree with everything. I second that motion. And I've, like you, Sarah, I've ridden transit systems like all over the world. And ironically, the Beijing system is more easy for an English speaker to use than the metro system. Because everything is in Chinese and English, it's direct, it works really well, plus it's cheap, okay? But that's an aside. I mean, we all approach this from our own experiences. I mean, let's be honest. Transit doesn't go where people want to go in the way they want to go there. And the car is perfect. You get out of your house, you get right into your car, it's heated. And it's got a big trunk, so you don't have to lug groceries. And I did go to the grocery store today. I want you to know that. But for me, it's look at Lyft and Uber, look at the business models, and we ought to see if they don't offer a whole lot more in the transit space than we've really explored. So from my standpoint, I'd like to see how for some people, like I ride Metro Rail to go in and out of DC most of the time. So for some sorts of trips, the established, what do they call them, routes, work okay. Although
Fixed
why we
rates.
have people sitting on the pavement waiting for a bus is just beyond me. But there are a lot of trips, if you're talking about these daily trips, that really have to be on demand. And if transit is serious about dramatically increasing, we need to study where people are going, when they're going, and provide them the service that they find attractive. Easy to say, hard to do. And then, of course, there's the money issue. How do you afford this?
I just want to sort of second and expand on that, which is, again, when transit's working well, you don't even check the schedule. So that's something else I've experienced recently. Like I walked out of City Hall to catch a train, and I didn't even look at when the next bus was coming on King Street because the frequency is such that like it was going to be less than 10 minutes from now, and it ended up being 6 minutes or something. So that's the confidence and the comfort and less to think about and analyze. As far as another data point to look into, and I think this gets to Libby's point about who isn't like using transit, there seems to be a real focus on commuting, but so many car trips have nothing to do with going to or from work. And I feel like those are the harder ones to convert because commuting happens on a fixed schedule at a time when we have lots of action in the system, VRE is, facing this challenge too. But so many of the people who I'm trying to sort of, get to kind of rethink, does the ride to CVS require your 6-seater SUV, to pick up a prescription kind of vibe? And so is there a way to identify how do people use their cars unrelated to commuting? I think we know some of this already, but research it with an eye towards, okay, how can we convert some of those non-commuting activities? We sort of know how to do the commuting thing. We've just lost commuters. So now it's more about, okay, we're probably not going to get some of those commuters back. Some of these jobs are just going to perpetually be done from home. So if we want, for emission's sake and safety's sake and infrastructure sake, to get people out of their cars, we have to get like the CVS trip out of a car. We have to get the soccer run out of the car. And so I'd love to understand more about the volume, nature, distance of those trips And what routage and transit would it take to induce those customers to make a different choice?
Yeah, it's a really critical point that people are saying over and over again is now that transit has lost a percentage of commute trips, looks like forever. Well, how do they capture a lot more of the trips that are outside of the commute? Because those are vastly outnumbering commute trips, and they always have, actually. Did you have one other thing? Because I want to move to the next exercise.
Okay, yeah, just-
Yeah.
I'm just one of these people, so I feel terribly guilty. I hardly ever take transit. I really, so I've got a house here with 2 cats. I've got my mother here who's 95. I have to see her 4 times a day. I've got meetings here, meetings here, meetings here. And I am flying around. It's different every day. And I have 5 minutes to spend. I'm 15 minutes late for here. So, and I don't know that I'm all that unusual. And I don't know how we solve that one. And it might be Uber, Jitney's something, and I don't know if we can afford it.
Well, that's why we have a research program, is to try to help answer some of that.
Yeah.
So here's what we're going to do in the short time we have left. We've got,
Couple big questions, I
Oh, yeah.
think. So
Yeah.
how to increase transit ridership, I think is kind of the issue that a lot of that seems to have fallen in is, you know, how to get understanding why people take transit, why people drive versus transit. I think that was one of the big topic. There was something about accessibility, ease of use. What else have what else are the kind of the big buckets in here for those sticking out?
I mean, I heard cost
Cost,
as a big one.
yeah,
And then I've heard that this concept of gender and generational specific issues.
yeah.
Cost is tricky though, I gotta tell you, because it's fundamentally cheaper. You know what I mean? Over the course of a year and a budget. Was cost of producing transit or for the
I
user?
heard cost
Right,
of
that's what-
providing transit.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
Yeah.
From a user perspective, that's an education
No, and
component.
I do come and think of that. I could get rid of the car and just do lists all the time, but then there's issues with doing that.
Can I add frequency since we're getting to such specifics? I think that's a big one.
That's we're about to do that. So we're
Yeah,
about to
right.
get,
I'm just trying to figure out what the buckets
yeah.
are.
So these are the buckets we have so far, and you can start writing on your sticky notes if you have.
And then
Help
I
value
think
the
there were a
sticky
couple
notes.
more macroeconomic issues, which I might put on the bigger.
You can text me or text me.
Yeah.
So what we'd like you to write on your sticky notes are the more specific things that you think need to be researched under these buckets. So some of them you've already told us, and that's fine. You can write those again if you want to reiterate them. But what are the specific, like when you think about what is a research question that you would want answered under that? Like that's what research is, right? It's like answering a question. So what is the question that you think needs to be answered under that category? And you can put as many sticky notes, as many categories as you
You're
like.
having her text you.
And write those down and post them in where Sophie's put them on the board.
Like understanding the demographics and TOD and land use, but I've talked a little bit more into more of the economic
Uh-huh.
topics. What did I forget?
Service design.
So it's both the redundancy
Oh, there,
and the overlap and the TNC issues. Yeah, I think those are kind of the big buckets, so.
Got like 15 pens and they're all dry.
Yeah, you have to keep throwing out.
I don't throw anything out though.
I know, I mean, I feel your pain. We can do a whole collection, an art project of dead pens.
I'll be capturing Dolly's when she.
If you cannot read my handwriting, please say something.
So we're supposed to put more questions under each bullet?
More specific.
More specific. So
Okay.
these are topics, right? These are big picture topics. Now the question is, well, what specific research question would you want to answer
What's-
under that topic?
What's the white paper?
Yeah.
Or
If we were going to do a research study, what would we say we want to know the answer
Xavier's next PhD.
One is enough.
If you get doctor, how's it working?
to? Anytime, yeah. Yeah, this is not the end of the input.
Oh,
You are welcome to share ideas with us at any time.
Politics and transit, because this is already settled, right? We can read it.
all right.
Right.
So if I say jitney system, does that mean something?
Hampton?
Well, what question about jitney systems do you want answered that would help you lead to?
Can we develop, I want to know if we want.
I think of as the one of the Hamptons, like, is that what you're talking about?
No, well, jitneys are in like, is that?
Like an
I don't
on-demand.
know. They were
Terrible, but like Cape Cod.
Yeah,
Around the
yeah,
world,
it's
they're
kinda like-
basically lawn mowers.
Oh, I was
They're
thinking of like.
riding mowers, and they're on little cars, and they fly all around the city, and they're all over the place. You pick, it's like a cab, but they're really tiny, and they just go everywhere, and they're all over the place because nobody has cars. Have you ever been to India or Jamaica or whatever?
Yes.
Yeah, they're little. I'll bring you one. I have a toy one. But anyway, it's just, they're like they're rider mowers.
Who drives it?
There's a driver each time. That's the problem because
There's a
these are
driver like
countries.
a cab.
Mhm.
This is not what should we do, it's what.
What should we think about? Research.
should we research?
Yeah, and I think if we had robots and automated ones, we could probably do it. That's my guess.
It's worth asking.
It's an okay question. I don't know.
Everything at this point is okay. This is.
All right,
Yes.
because I've decided that's the
Fair.
only thing that's gonna get me out of my car between everything I have to do. I'm a human, we're all human ping pong balls sometimes, right? It's just.
This is the right group.
Guilty every time I go to a metro.
Don't feel guilty. System worked well, you would be on.
Or if I had 48 hours in a day.
Yeah, so I can, yes, sure,
Or we can collect them if you like.
whatever you prefer.
You don't know what.
I don't know where you want to put
No,
it.
no,
Yeah.
get your steps in. Go ahead. Size of a sticky note. No, it's fine.
That's right, you didn't even leave enough space.
Is Kate transcribing Dahlia's?
I am. She's like, I'm going as
I was
fast as
like,
I
my
can.
God, as you can, and she's-
I do not, I am.
Her thumbs are faster than yours.
I'm not
Can I
done,
just-
Kate. Thank you.
I'm like, can I just get this to print onto the stickies? Thank you. I guess I have to figure out where these go.
So this is more like a survey questions. No. Oh, no, it's fine.
No question, every
No,
question.
no, I'm just thinking some of those are actually in. With building block story survey. What do you do? You currently can't do on transit. How many places?
Julie, I was saying,
Should be gone.
in every metro, you get off the metro, they have a metro system, it's in Stockholm. Always a little grocery store in the
I'm gonna talk
station.
about the places
Yeah.
that you should take a,
We come home and
It's
they
like
pick
the
up their kids, they
bodegas,
pick
yeah.
up their groceries and
get them down somehow, however you want to get them
I don't know what I wrote there.
Right.
we've just developed real differently here.
Or, I,
Yeah.
it doesn't, I mean, obviously the buckets overlap, but it's not.
Oh, you know what? I didn't look. Which one? More homework.
Yeah, it's not. People drive versus transit.
Keep getting my laptop slow, so I keep I'm off by like 2 minutes.
Are they goodies for?
These are pretty nice. There's vegetables and cookies.
Oh, wow.
So you can have one of both and if you're perfect.
No, it's Mr. Snyder.
You're being beckoned to someone.
Actually.
So, okay, so,
Transition. Right around there.
okay.
This is just a teaser in the story.
I think that's enough. No, this is really gonna help.
Yeah?
Two of us.
Going to the workshop next month?
No, staff are having.
You're invited. It's the one that's on the 20th. The usual, so.
All right. Too many questions, too little research budget.
And it's okay, because some of these things we might find that others have done, we can,
That is true.
Some of these things will have obvious funding sources.
yes, potentially.
Right.
Or they're just two, they're two boards. Yeah.
This is not.
Sneak past you.
Mhm.
I'm comfortable with that.
And that's kind of one of those things. Oh. Yeah, congestion price,
I'm gonna
We're gonna.
thank you and ask you to wrap this up.
All right.
But
I wonder-
Okay, so if I could invite everybody to start migrating back towards the table, I understand Mr. Schenk has a timing element that we want to respect. So do you want to bring some closure to
Yeah,
sort
I
of?
mean, so this is great, and we'll go through these, and
Yes.
we're gonna take a look and see like, okay, where's their overlap? How do we distill these into some good, research topics? And that will all go into, how we construct the vision, of the research program. So, I just want to say thank you for being such great participants in this. All of the, like, you obviously care a lot and have a lot of ideas about this stuff, and that's great, because that's not always true. I've worked with plenty of boards who are most indifferent to this stuff, so it's wonderful. Thank you for your time, and thank you for allowing me to be part of it. So see me again soon.
All right, thank you very much for the facilitated discussion. I'm going to hand it back to Xavier to sort of introduce the next portion of the research discussion. Yes?
Okay. So the next portion is essentially just a preview of what we are currently working on. We have two papers that the Transit Resource Center, which is the program I manage, is working on. Next.
We've got it here in front of you as
Yeah.
well, 2 pages.
So I will, yeah, so the first one is, I'll go over the first one, and then Sophie, I believe, is on the call, and she'll be going over the second one, because that's the one she's managing. The first one is the climate benefits of transit in Northern Virginia. Excuse me.
So we'll just see if we can get the slide.
Yep.
There we go.
There's a lot of words in this slide, which is always less than ideal, but this is more an information slide to give you a heads up of what was captured in here. The report itself has a lot of analysis, but essentially we capture how many emissions Transit Northern Virginia reduces every year in this region. An important point from our analysis shows that all bus fuel types, even diesel buses, are a much greater environmental option than using cars. And we emphasize that using different metrics.
Forget how we drive and just get people.
And then there are opportunities. I looked at the policies as well from each of the agencies and each of the region, each of the jurisdictions. And there are a huge variety in different policies that intersect transit and the environment. And there's a really good opportunity for different jurisdictions in the region to learn from each other. Everyone's tackling this in different ways, and there's opportunities to really look at what everyone else is doing and learn from each other. From this report, we have 5 main recommendations, and we're going to talk about this in a lot more detail in the April meeting.
Yes.
Essentially, the main recommendations: number 1, increase ridership. So great to see that discussed today. Next is reducing what we call deadheading, which is the miles and hours when a transit vehicle is not taking passengers. Increasing the amount of transit in the region in general. Speeding up buses using bus priority infrastructure and policies. And then transitioning to zero emission buses. And the graphic on the right of the slide, it does different ways of conceptualizing the environmental benefits of transit in the region. How much of an impact are we talking about when we say 120,000 metric tons of CO2? That doesn't really mean anything to anyone. So here's the different ways that you can capture it and imagine it. So that's a summary of that, and I'll turn over to Sophie, who's going to talk about briefly talk about her report.
Can I ask one quick question?
Oh, yes, sorry.
Just, and I recognize the studies already, the information has been done, but was it looked at all in there if electric buses help in the inducement? Like, is there a kind of person who like hears and sees and breathes a diesel bus and thinks, well, I don't want to, contribute to that. But if the bus is electric, they actually feel like they're doing something positive on a climate front by getting on the electric bus?
Yeah, so we didn't look at that so much because we didn't have that kind of data, but we did look at like electric bus versus electric car, diesel bus versus electric car. So different bus fuel types and car fuel types to see what rises to the top. And there's more analysis that dives into that and talks about that. That's why we have the point that all bus fuel types, even diesel buses, are a much greater environmental option. And so more important, just get more bus service out there, regardless of the fuel type. Definitely get that there are some elements of that are not captured in just like what is the actual environmental emissions. It's the perception, not just what you actually have.
Yeah, I think some people find, the diesel, they get dirty, they smell bad. You just want to avoid them.
Yeah, I completely agree and understand that all bus ridership is less car, individual car. I do wonder if that's an inducement tool as well, if people just feel better choosing a cleaner vehicle.
It wasn't the scope of this, but that doesn't mean it can't be on that, right?
Good to know.
Yeah. Out there, yeah. Okay, thank you.
I have just a question. By the way, comfort of using and the quality of the vehicle and all the smoothness, etc., is a huge thing that should be really articulated at some point. Question: the 120 to 160,000 ton carbon equivalent, is that the transit as it is used today, or what? Or is it a function of how many people, how many trips we're taking as
based on existing ridership? So basically, everyone who uses transit.
Ridership of today. Okay,
yes,
gotcha.
Exactly.
Xavier?
Yes.
Hey, this is pretty awesome. I don't know if this was asked, but sort of thinking about the type of vehicle question, is there data on, like, I remember when the circulators first started in DC, not just the routes, but the type of buses and the cost, right? And sort of the comfort and feeling like it's a little bit more, I don't know, it felt, how do you say that? More comfortable for people who weren't used to buses.
That wasn't captured in this, but we'll add it to the ideas for future study.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're to Sophie.
All right, can you all hear me okay, I hope?
Yep.
Yes.
And
Okay, perfect. So like Xavier said, oh good, my video's on. So like Xavier said, I'm gonna just give a super brief preview of the other study we've been working on, which is the Northern Virginia Transit Trends Report. And this will also be presented at the April Commission meeting. So this is gonna be very, very high level, just a few takeaways. But in this report, we analyzed trends over both space and time. We wanted to review how transit has and has not changed over the last 15 years. And so and we looked at this in the context of ridership and service metrics, looking at things like, we looked at pure ridership numbers, we looked at average trip length, bus speed, lots of different metrics to get a full picture. And then in the second portion of the report, we looked at how people moved across the region in one snapshot year, which was 2017, which is the most recent data that we had available to understand more spatially where people are going on a given day. And because this is really high level, I'm just going to cut to the chase and run through the three main takeaways from this report, and then you can see the rest of it in April when we present. But the first of which was that we saw an overemphasis on classic peak, off-peak, Monday through Friday, commuter-oriented scheduling, which you all were just discussing earlier in your workshop. Ms. Bagley alluded to this specifically earlier, but I have the numbers. Almost 2/3 of trips in Northern Virginia are not commutes. Wow. So only, I think it's 36% of trips is commutes, and then the other 2/3
30% of
Nom, nom, nom.
So that's some high-speed analysis for you. And the second takeaway was, as you've heard me talk about before, and Xavier, the region's bus speeds have slowed down over time, and we do have ways to speed these up. I've talked to you previously about bus priority treatments. This ties all back to our advancing bus priority report from last year. We have specific bus priority treatments and even more bus priority BRT incoming with the Vision Route 7 and similar things. And that rolls me into our third takeaway, which is that more transit connections are needed within Virginia, which you all were just talking about as well. There's so much movement that happens in transit into and out of DC, but people move more than in and out of DC. They move in more than just that direction by implementing BRT, like the Envision Route 7 project, high capacity transit corridors like on Columbia Pike, NVTC's regional bus analysis that we're currently working on. These all are working to contribute to enhance these intra-state, interjurisdictional connections that are more than just in and out of the urban hub. And I would be remiss to not mention Better Bus Network redesign, which is also working on these kinds of connections and a focus on more high frequency transit. So that's just a little nibble of the full presentation that you will get in April at the commission, and that will have a lot more detailed findings and more takeaways. But for now, you can enjoy these 3 takeaways and this little video of changing commuting trends.
That's crazy.
Well, and it all starts to happen in 2019. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
kind of totally focused on this little movie.
Yeah,
keeps going.
It's like you have to get attracted to it.
Stop at 22.
We'll have more details in the report. This is just.
Yes.
I promise there's many more. There's a lot more graphs.
And if I
No
could,
more of them move though.
I don't think this is in the script. So obviously, we started talking about the research strategic plan. We're diving into some of the most recent things. June 14th, we are doing a policy symposium as a part of our 60th anniversary. It's going to be over at the George Mason Arlington campus. So you're going to be hearing a little bit more about that. That's not all going to be NVTC showcasing. We're going to get a chance to do that, but it's also showcasing thematically a lot of the things that we've been working at, especially for those who've been in the commission for a little while. My sense is we're going to probably have some zero emission bus stuff. We are going to have some transit trend stuff. But anyway, just stay tuned because that's going to be an all-day symposium, very much geared to our jurisdictional staff and partners and consultants and all that. But you guys will get all the information and definitely welcome to come. So that will be like a day of geeking out on transit data and analysis and policy work. So I just had to put that in there.
Well, get us the sessions ahead of time because I'm located. I could just drop in.
Yeah,
and just do
exactly.
one
Well,
and
yeah,
stuff.
you were gonna
We're
hear
working
plenty
on it.
about that.
We're
So
working
sorry
on
for
it. No.
snatching. I was like, because all this kind of stuff feeds right into this. But you guys are gonna see this a little bit later this spring at the commission meeting. We just wanted you guys to get a preview of it.
Okay, well, thank you, Xavier and Sophie, for your work and presentation. We'll see more in April. And we're going to move on then to our commuter choice program. We're well into the 25-26 funding cycle for the I-66 corridor, and Ben Owen is here to walk us through the program updates and some ideas for the committee to discuss.
Yes,
Go for it, Ben.
great. Thank you all. Good to be with you again for the first time in a while. So I do have a few updates on our I-66 commuter choice fiscal year 25-26 process. Next slide, please. The first element is eligibility review. So we held our call for projects late last year. We received 15 applications with a total $23.7 million request. We've looked through all for consistency with benefiting inside the Beltway toll payers, as well as program goals of moving more people and representing improvements that would improve mobility, travel options, safety, and reliability. So we are expecting to carry forward 11 of these with a roughly $13.5 million total funding request. They comprise 8 bus service improvements. These are largely established services. They are commuter focused, but they've seen on the whole like ridership bouncing back in the last couple of years. So 8 of those, 2 TDM incentive campaigns, and 1 bike share expansion. Now, there's somewhat of a difference between 13.5 and $23.7 million. Most of that consists of 3 bus services that we've referred to DRPT for consideration under their the Beltway funding program. That funding. These are 2 OmniRide commuter routes, one beginning in Front Royal, one in Warrenton, going into Arlington and DC. And then 1 local Fairfax connector bus route that would parallel much of I-66 outside the Beltway in Fairfax County. So DRPT has those 3 applications. They do remain in our process for now. If DRPT opts to fund them this spring, we would anticipate withdrawing them, coordinating that from our process. There was one proposal definitively withdrawn. That was to move a VRE afternoon inbound train to the morning peak period. So while that would have benefited morning commuters, the operation is already fully funded by VRE, and our program policy is that we can't supplant other funding sources. So we are moving into scoring. Once we complete that, we will work with DRPT to obtain formal input from the Office of the Attorney General, as well as we do in each round. So $13.5 million, you might be comparing that to the $40 to $50 million we advertised as being available this round. And a couple of the things I'm going to talk about after this address that. This corridor, since the pandemic, has not had as much of a rebound in commuter demand as we've seen in our 395-95 corridor, where travel and transit volumes are higher, and we've seen a lot more demand for our funding. Department of Defense travel in that corridor, which partly helps to explain the quicker rebound. But also in the 66 corridor, there have been other significant sources of funding to support some of the types of improvements we typically would have been asked to fund, like commuter parking facilities, as well as some of the longer distance travel services. And that funding is from the Outside the Beltway Express Lanes concessionaire. So we have put a good bit of thought into these circumstances, and I will talk about a couple of the strategies, but first I will stop for any questions on the applications we've received.
Seeing any at the
Okay.
moment?
All right, on we go.
I ask something. So the TDM, how is that application structured for TDM? So 1.5 million funding requests. So is there specific TDM measures that are then priced and?
Yeah. So one of these is a half fare campaign on OmniRide routes in the corridor. So they would be basically measuring those trips at the fare box and reporting ridership and billing us based on that. The other is kind of a companion project to a reinstatement of Amtrak step-up ticketing on the Fredericksburg line that we funded in the last 395 round. So basically VRE would be integrating with Amtrak's app for people to be able to book reservations on Amtrak trains.
Gotcha. Okay. Good question. Bang for the buck for TDM.
Yeah, no, we're measuring it directly now. Yeah. Yeah.
Not doing as well as we do, but we come so close.
So close.
For far less money though. That's the problem.
Sorry,
Cool. Next slide then. Okay, so one of our proposed strategies at staff level at this point is to shift a portion of our total award for a project that uniquely benefits toll payers in both of our program corridors from I-395-95 to I-66. And this project specifically is VRE's new expanded Crystal City station. It is served by both lines, and we funded this in the last I-395 round. It was one of our first, what we call larger capital project awards, under which we basically split our total contribution across consecutive programs and projects. So we funded $10.8 million last year as part of the $18.8 million award. The $8 million outstanding on the project that we originally expected to fund the next 395 round, we would look to fund that in the I-66 program currently instead. Since there is ample funding available, it does have benefits to toll payers in both corridors. It would free up room for new projects in the next 395 round, where we anticipate demand to be pretty high. We have talked with VRE. They support the concept since they're working through final design of the station, and it would give them the funding in place sooner for construction. We have discussed it with DRPT staff and our legal counsel. There have been identified, just given the demand versus supply of funding, it wouldn't include funding for anything else. And if we advance it, we would figure out kind of how best to package this, but we would document all of the kind of distinctive circumstances here as thoroughly as we need to, and have it go through the Meeks review on the I-66 corridor again, where the Office of the Attorney General would look at it and provide feedback just for good measure. So this is unique. It's the first time we've considered something like this under the program. I will stop here to see if there are any questions, thoughts on the concept.
So you're gonna, it'll complete this project faster.
Yes.
That's the idea. By a year or more, it was.
Yeah, it would be a year sooner.
Yeah, cool. And can I, is that right? And I recollect, once the station gets set, there should be connection to the airport, connection to VRE, connection to Amtrak, connection to Metro, a connection to like everything, right?
And the Mount Vernon
Buses.
Trail.
And the Mount Vernon bus trail. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's quite a bit.
Yeah, it's pretty huge.
But this will need a decision from the commission at the right time because we're effectively taking from what would have been on a different program and moving into this one.
Right.
But the nice thing, I think VRE is almost unique in that space, is that these assets along from Crystal City and Alexandria and LaFont, they are both the Manassas line, which is parallel to 66. We've already received determination that is parallel and effective use of the 66 funding, as well as the 395. So this was almost in a unique situation to be able to move this and front this early with the 66 funding. But it's obviously something that the commission would need to be, and then eventually sort of stamped approval by the CTP.
I have a question. I was wondering, I'm very supportive of this. Do we have a sense if there are any reduced costs that I assume would be associated to moving it up a year early?
Yes. Question.
Yeah, that is a good question.
So there's a VRE board meeting tomorrow. Takis and I can perhaps,
Check with Rich.
Just
Yeah.
inflation, I bet. Usually, I mean, time is money.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
It
they
was
usually
on,
have a contingency with their projects, so maybe this actually
could help
is a
with
better
that.
chance of that.
Yeah.
would it be premature at this stage to discuss it with VR? I mean, you've already raised it with VRE.
We raised it with VRE
So they're
staff.
aware
We're
of
raising
it. Okay.
publicly here. They're aware of it.
Yeah.
Report back. Let me know how it goes.
I mean, it was scored already under the 395, so it will be scored again under 66, same criteria, right?
But it sounds like a good topic for like the VRE exec committee tomorrow morning,
Yeah.
to just discuss it in that context.
I can be there. I will be there.
Right, we'll both be there.
Yeah.
So.
And I'm assuming it's supposed to, I mean, it'll increase ridership probably, right? I mean, this is just like a leveraging goosing. I mean, it sounds, it's
Yeah.
great.
Definitely leverages a lot of the redevelopment going on around there.
Well, and more people coming and then they can come and connect and, yeah.
So let me
Sarah,
ask
you
a
can match
couple questions.
Get on a plane to fly to Paris.
So, what's the VRE ridership? It's lower than Metro Rail, right?
I don't know how to compare the apples to apples part of that, but
No, it's doubles. It's about 8,000.
yeah, I mean, it's up, which is, it continues to
It
go up.
continues to go
And
up.
it's, this year, I think January was, hitting 8,000 on its,
It's up, but where is it compared to 2019?
It's
Number
about
one. Number two,
45% less,
is there, how much?
45%.
45% less.
Recovering slower than Metro,
Right.
Metropolitan Metro, we don't, but I mean, the Metro doesn't classify it exactly. So, but recovering nevertheless.
So at some point, somebody's gonna ask, you keep funding VRE projects, large projects, expensive projects, and the ridership doesn't support them. So all I would say is those would be involved in the VRE, and one of the few jurisdictions that has no VRE service. And frankly, would probably view removal of funds from I-66 to yet another VRE project as a negative. I'll leave that aside, but I haven't seen something that is convincing that this investment is a cost-effective way to bring riders back. Maybe it's there. All I'm urging VRE and everyone involved in the VRE world to please make that case more strongly than has been made so far. Because I see expensive project after expensive project being funded, and yet the ridership maybe is crawling back. So I would just, and I think that's a legitimate question, particularly now that we're talking about removing money from the I-66 corridor that would benefit jurisdictions not served by VRE into yet another VRE set of projects. The second thing is there a payback from I-395/95 back to the I-66 after this $8 million is removed from I-66, or it's gone? It's not an advance that will be refunded.
Yeah, the proposal is to use, because this is undersubscribed, is to use those funds now for the Crystal City project. That's the proposal.
Okay,
It's just a
no,
proposal.
there's a regional issue and it's a regional body, so I go along with what the region wants. But I think there are fundamental questions that have not been successfully answered with regard to VRE. So I'll just leave it there.
And I mean, if I could, I mean, I think to some extent in my ongoing education, over the last 2 years with VRE, they were at almost capacity, as the pandemic arrived. I mean, they were 19,000 people or, they were reaching a point. So, and the lead time that goes in, to some of these projects, the how do we start to deal with what are our approaching capacity issues and, the expansion elsewhere. So I think to your point, in some ways, the CRISA, ARPA, all the various money that is currently alleviating what would otherwise be really obvious pressures on VRE is on a time frame. I mean, there's a year or two left of that. So the questions that you're raising now, are going to have to be answered, in the next 18 months anyway. And I appreciate you're sort of raising them now. The reality is they've got to be answered one way or the other over the next 18 months. And so I see your point. I think some of this was largely envisioned and scoped and studied at a time when capacity was different and, and usage was different. And for me to have, if I would have been in the rooms, let's say in 2021, I think I would have still been of the mindset, well, we don't know yet where this all shakes out, after the pandemic. And so now, to your point, it's coming back, but it's probably not, going to be exactly what it was before. So I do think we're approaching a point with VRE where we have to right size in some way. So I hear you. I don't dismiss the concern. I think part of this capacity and part of this project is also designed for Amtrak to play a role in that station as well. You can't currently stop. Amtrak can't use that as a stop. So there's other sort of elements here.
Right, that's why I brought up my question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and it's the airport.
So,
Yeah, and there's a connection to the airport. I mean, David, you're really good points.
Yeah.
I think this is much more than Amtrak, I guess. That's what
And in
was
fact,
thinking.
Ted, I do know that, so VRE is working on their system plan and they will be coming to the commission this spring to be presenting their next, and that's their 2050 plan. And I think, and that will be before the commission's going to be making a decision about this. So I think there's some opportunities for conversation and reflection on that. So yes, so the timing of that
Tell
should
Rich
work
to be
well.
ready for Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
a couple of footnotes to that.
Yeah, that's not all.
Oh.
A couple of footnotes to that. So VRE is making the case of even with the lower service and lower ridership, it is helping us decongest I-66 and reduce the demand on the 395 system and the I-66 system. That case is made, and it's pretty good actually. The second thing is VRE until now was the haired child of the transportation system that didn't have its own trucks. So a lot of the investment here goes also into the capacity increase of VRE, of the ability to scale the delivery from the level of service of VRE. The questions are absolutely valid, but we have to see also what kind of obstacles VRE has up to date. So in Crystal City, for example, there will be fourth track in there. That's not there today. It's massive federal investment in an additional bridge. There is massive investment in the Franconia bypass. That all integrates VRE in the transportation system of the entire region now.
Okay, thanks.
So is there one more slide?
There is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's not all. So another element is for the benefit of future calls for projects, staff would like to take a closer look at the universe of potential I-66 corridor improvements that our funding, as well as DRPTs outside the Beltway funding, could support. The most recent studies to do so are pretty obsolete at this point. The Inside the Beltway study was conducted in 2012. Outside the Beltway was published in February 2020. We know there are major capital improvements to come into the corridor, including other VPRA projects, as well as WMATA's proposed Roslyn Metro Rail infrastructure improvements. So staff would like to take a closer look at the role that both I-66 commuter choice, as well as DRPT's funding could play in these transformational efforts. We would look to ground the effort in analyses of current and potential future travel trends and needs along the full extent of the corridor, and have broad discussions with all of our plans for the corridor. Engage with VDOT as well as the owner of the I-66. So beyond looking at potential investment strategies for major capital projects, final product would also provide a resource for eligible applicants in deciding what projects aligned with program goals they could apply for in future calls for projects. So we started discussing the concept with DRPT staff. If it moves forward, we'd look to include the NVTC portion of the study cost in our I-66 commuter choice administrative set-aside request that would be bundled with the program project's approval. So not something we'd be asking the jurisdiction specifically to support. So another kind of outside the box concept here. I'm interested in any questions, thoughts you have at this point. We would have more specific details to share at our next meeting.
Are there any other questions for Ben and staff? Yeah.
I would just say that there's a linkage between what we've been talking about there and this. Part of it is getting people into transit that exists in the corridor, which means jurisdictions all up and down the corridor might have an interest in smaller projects. One of the things that I see it, I'll be honest about it, at NVTA as well as here, is the big projects are being funded, but try to get money for bike ped or micro transit, good luck. So part of the issue that I'm trying, and maybe it's because these criteria have been set in legislation, but things like bus shelters, I mean,
Basic.
yeah, basic. Why are we've got, seem to have a lot of money for big projects, but boy, try to fill in gaps and exactly that kind of thing, and the money doesn't seem to be there. So
And
if we're
so
gonna
we've
look at
actually been,
this,
as we've
right.
actually did bike share in the city. We've
Right.
done bus shelters in
Right.
Arlington. So I think that there's opportunities in here.
Right.
Well, that's what the multimodal.
Yeah, so we've
Yeah.
actually been able to do small projects. We've got a bike paths going up near
Right.
Vienna Metro. So
Yeah.
this actually does provide some opportunities, but the jurisdictions need to come with the applications. And so I think that's the thing in particular we found this time, was that we did a lot of outreach to our jurisdictions, and there were not projects coming forward. This money, by the way, is not use or lose. Okay, so if we have a smaller program right now, it just sits in the bank. But part of the reason that Ben and the team want to propose is us do a new study is because the studies that say what was needed in that corridor have now been overtaken by just the way people are changing and the way. I think a really important thing to understand is right now, the legal thing we have is that we are supporting people that move in 66 when it's tolled inside the Beltway, which is in the morning, and out 66 when it's tolled heading out in the afternoon. Those are the legal constraints because that is what this funding must be used for. So that is a dynamic because we must be using the tolls revenues to benefit the toll payers of those revenues, and these are based on inside the Beltway.
If I may,
Okay.
add to that,
Yeah.
so I really appreciate, I think it is important to do a study because as we talk about, we're a region and it's a little bit different for each jurisdiction, right? And so for Fairfax, you know, those small projects versus a large project and what we apply for and how we use that funding, you know, and the fact that VDOT owns our roads makes things a little bit different than it does from some other jurisdictions. I know that while that it was excellent to get that trail, some other things that we want, you know, we don't know necessarily that we'll be able to get them approved by VDOT. So sometimes the process is a little bit different for the county than it is for the city. But as David knows, is when we work at joint projects, they're super helpful. But I do think, you know, I've had conversations with our staff to understand why we didn't have more projects. And I also would probably recommend that we all do that with our jurisdictions to understand that as well as through this, because it is. trying to understand why it's underfunded. I think it's a really huge question, because I know there are a lot of different ways and things that we want to get funded.
Capital is one way we've sort of worked with that a little bit too, since capital projects benefit people during the peak period, they benefit during off-peak periods as well, so.
I think my only point with regard to this agenda item is be careful how we define the corridor, if you will, and make sure we're taking a truly holistic view. Yes, it's the big things, but it's also the small things that enable people to get to transit.
Yep.
It's, and you're right, the program
Yeah,
has made a good faith effort at doing
Yeah.
that. I would just urge that we not lose that going forward.
absolutely. And we have a wonderful, when we work with the administration on the multi-decade agreement, there's literally a map of the corridor and its parallel paths. It's 50, it's 7, it's 29, as well as I-66. And so that gives us a wonderful, and that's how we were able to do the bike share and how we were able to do other things. So, but it is true, technical capacity, even within the jurisdictions, to be doing 7,000 different applications with different rules, some that are in code and some that are in agreements, is not, we recognize the challenge of that. So, but again, this money's not going away. We want to just help our jurisdictions to be strategic so that we can be making those investments in the future. So.
I just want to highlight, I think it was such a good comment about bus shelters. We wonder why don't people riding, because they got to stand out in the hot sun. And I mean, it's just because it's always been that way, so we don't think about it, but it's really a good point to.
Yeah, that was actually one of our first projects
Yeah.
for Arlington County, was helping do bus shelters, I think, on a number of different.
Yep, I still get upset sometimes, why don't we have a shelter there? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
I have mapped out next steps too, but I'm happy to just say I'll be back in April. Completed storing at that.
You and the cherry blossoms.
Yeah. Perennial.
We lost, okay. Well, thank you, Ben and staff for the work. And I want to just commend, I guess, the creative thinking that did go into this, whether it's ultimately approved by the full commission. I think it's good that this sort of creative thinking is done. Think a little bit outside the box. Is there any other business before the pack, or any other final questions or comments from committee members?
No, I told our consultant, I thought this was therapeutic for us. Thank you.
I had one more idea for the consultant. Should I stick it on the?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank
absolutely.
you.
Sounds like a yes. Okay, well, so then I will remind.
They also have an email, so.
You're assuming it'll stay in my brain until I get to my email.
The next PAC meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 11th at 4:30 p.m. in the same location. We'll get an update on Envision Route 7, BRT, strategic implementation plan, and have a discussion about staff's I-66 Commuter Choice recommended program of projects, which we've gotten the preview. So thank you, everybody, and we are adjourned.